Hello, everybody. Well, good morning. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to jump on here and give a little presentation on something I've been very interested in lately. That is quartal triads. But as advertised in the video, I did mention what's the worst thing you could do with your guitar. And maybe there's a couple things that are a little bit worse, but here's some visual evidence, or I should say, visual effects of the worst thing you could do. Yes, that is my acoustic guitar, Outlier workshop guitar, bought in 2009, and yesterday I dropped it. I had it lying by my desk. I turned, my winter coat brushed up against it, and boom. It fell rather innocently, but with a very loud and thundering crack. That's what happened. So, pay attention. I've been playing guitar for 26 years. I've never done this before. Don't drop your guitar. Now on to something for me a little bit more interesting is quartal triads. So, welcome to my presentation. January 13th, 2026 with Stash Wyslouch. If you want the PDF to all of these slides, please become a patron on my Patreon page, where we will also have follow-up materials. I've done some quick tips on this also in the past, quartal triads, but I just wanted to revisit it with maybe a different lens. So, we have a major scale, let's say C major. We know the operation of building the triads we know and love, major, minor, diminished, augmented, based off of the scale. You start on a note, you skip a note, you stack it on, so C, skip a D, put an E, skip an F, put a G, you get a C, E, and G, a major triad. We know that very well, and we've done lots, dozens probably, of quick tips, dozens of workshops on my Patreon page, and lots of other workshops like Unlocking the Guitar version 1 through 12, where I've talked about how exploring these triads is one of the great ways to unlock the guitar neck. Learn those 3-note shapes all over the neck, their significance, and you'll have a footstep to a much greater understanding of the guitar. But these are chords built in thirds, intervals of thirds. C go up a third to E, go up a third to G. There's this whole other family of triads, of 3-note shapes that are built not in thirds, but in fourths. So you take a C, for example, in the C major scale, and you go up a fourth, from the 1 to the 4, and then from the F you go from a F to a B, up a fourth from the F. And what you get, if we're basing it off the 1, is a C, F, and B, a 1, 4, and 7. And that is kind of our abstract, degrees for the quartal triads. You have the root, the 1, the 4th, and the 7th. C, F, and B. It's a very ambiguous sound. It doesn't tell you much about the tonality. It doesn't even tell you much about what the center of the universe is. The F, the C as a home base feels pretty unstable. So, I don't know how these are going to be applicable anytime soon. They're so foreign to my ear, they're so foreign to my fingers, that I need to spend some time just getting acquainted with the sound, experiencing the quartal triad. So that's going to require a little bit of investigation, a little bit of practice, just to even get these structures in my ear. So this workshop is kind of aimed at a way to innocently explore quartal triads, maybe without the hopes of results immediately, meaning No, this isn't going to make you better at playing Big Mon, Big Sciota, or Autumn Leaves anytime soon, but maybe down the line it could open up some new musical doors, or maybe even get you into some new kinds of music that you didn't know you could appreciate by experiencing and exploring it for what it is, just the sound of these quartal triads. So let's derive all the quartal triads in the C major scale with our little algorithm where we just go up a fourth twice and stack it on. So there we have our quartal based off the 1, C, F, B. Here's our quartal based off the 2 perfect fourths in a row, D, G, and C. Quartal based off the 3, E, A, and D. A quartal based off the 4, F, B, and E. A quartal based off the 5, G, C, and F. And you know, when I'm exploring this on my own, this is literally what I'm doing. I'm sitting here, I'm writing these notes out, I'm just working it out piece by piece. It's interesting, just figuring out that these structures exist somewhere in that major scale, and we can figure out what they sound like. Quartal based off the 6th. And lastly, the quartal based off the 7th. Very cool. Now check it out. These are all of them with their abstract interval relationships. So quartal 1 gives you a perfect fourth and then an augmented fourth. F to B is not a perfect fourth, it's an augmented fourth, sharp 4. Quartal triads 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7 all give you perfect fourths stacked on top of each other. Quartal triad 4 gives you the opposite of quartal triad 1. It's an augmented fourth and then a perfect fourth. So it's this amazing ambiguous sound. It doesn't really tell you what key you're in even. It's hard to believe that this is even a major scale to me. Where's 1? Where's 4? Where's 5? That's one of the beautiful, amazing things about fourths is they're ambiguous. So if we learn to experience, hear, and understand this ambiguity, maybe we could use it down the line. But there's going to be a lot of work to be done before then. So these are the 3 families of quartal triads. So if we can kind of understand these, we're going to get a little closer. Here's quartal 1 on the guitar. So I've got the root labeled with a red dot, the 4 with a yellow dot, and the 7 with a green dot. So you can play that with me. One way to experience it and see if you're really listening is, can you sing each of these voices? So you play. Maybe you could just focus on the root, the bottom note. See if you can play it and hear it in your inner ear. So the process for that, which I've discussed in a quick tip before, is you play it, you sing the root note, you play it to confirm that you're right, then you hit it again, and you imagine yourself singing it and see if you can hear it within the chord. Do the same for the 4. I'm listening to it in my inner ear. It just pops out of nowhere. And then the top note, the 7. Cool. Quartal 2. Quartal 3. Quartal 4. Quartal 5, Quartal 6, and Quartal 7. So you can just play these as a scale. I don't know how I'm going to use these, but I sure am enjoying the sound, and maybe that's enough. So much of practice is geared towards results, which is important, but I think we miss a lot too when we get too obsessed with how everything is going to play out. Let's keep exploring a little bit. Actually, one comment here. Check this out. We could play this against different drones in the major scale. So we could do this against, for example, a D drone. Same exact triads, but now check it out against an A drone. So exciting. How about against a B drone? So, if you don't know about this, what we're dealing with right now is basically modal type of playing. We're really in a mode, and this ambiguous fourth thing allows us to have a different relationship to the notes in the major scale. And then it gets a little more interesting. Just like with our major, minor, diminished, and augmented triads, there's inversions for these quartal triads. How do the inversions work? Well, you have your root inversion, so in this case C, F, and B. C is the bottom note. To get to the first inversion, you move each voice, the bottom, middle, and top voice, to the next note in the triads. So now the bottom voice for the first inversion becomes the first note that's not a C, in this case an F, the 4. The 4 from the root inversion becomes the 7. The 7 from the root inversion becomes the 1. And then you do the same operation to get to the second inversion, and then it all resets and cycles back to the root. So in the same way with a C major triad, we have a root inversion, 5, 5, 3 on the DGB string, 9, 8, 8. On the GBE string, 5, 5, 3, 9, 8, 8 is the first inversion, C major, 12, 13, 12 is the second inversion. We're going to do the same thing for these quartal triads. So check this out. For a 1 quartal triad, we start here. Then our first inversion is this amazing sounding chord. Oh, it's crunchy, it's delicious, it's ambiguous. And then our second inversion, or as I've stated here, listen to those 3 in a row. Ooh, I love that. So that's our first family of quartal triads, right? It's a perfect fourth and then an augmented fourth. Our next family is just 2 perfect fourths. For example, our 2 quartal. There's our root. There's our first inversion. And there's our second inversion. And then lastly is our third family of quartals in the major scale, which has an augmented fourth and then a perfect fourth. Wow, crunchy. Listen to that again. Root. Whoops, that was wrong. Amazing. So where do we go from here? Well, first off, we just have to practice seeing this somehow. So you can just practice in the same way I prescribe when you're learning major triads. Learn the 3 inversions. 1 quartal, root inversion. 1 quartal, first inversion. 1 quartal, second inversion. Do it with the metronome, right? Sing the voices of the triad. And do that for all 7 of the quartal triads. You only really have to know 3 different families of triads, but now you have to see them against everything. And then for the final part of today's public workshop, try common chord root motion progressions, but instead do it with quartal voicings. So what do I mean? Well, when we're dealing with major, especially in bluegrass land, we know all about those 1, 4, 5, 1s. What's a 1, 4, 5 in quartal land sound like? Well, we could just do it literally using the root positions, moving them around a little bit, right? 2, 3, 4. I don't think that's going to work on Blue Ridge Cabin Home, but we're experiencing quartal triads. Maybe their use will become more apparent as we let the sound and feeling sink in. What an ambiguous, unstable sound. And yet, there's a familiar logic to it. Now, how do we make this motion even more interesting? Right here, we're just moving from root to root to root. What if we could voice lead these inversions? So voice leading, again, is if there's a common tone, hold it. And for the notes that are not common between the triads that you're changing, try to move those tones as little as possible. So if we start with our 1 quartal, and we're going to go to our 4 quartal chord, but we're going to see if we can move or hold over any common tones. So actually between the 1 quartal and the 4 quartal, there's 2 common tones. They both share an F and a B. So we're going to hold those and then move the other tone. It's just that bottom note that's moving. So you see, the 4th in the 1 quartal becomes the root of the 4 quartal. The 7th of the 1 quartal becomes the 4, or the sharp 4 of the 4 quartal. And this 1 moves up a major third to become the 7th of the 4 quartal. So already we have some interesting chord motion. Now let's hear that against the bass note. Are we even in C major anymore? It's crazy with these quartal triads. It's like it almost sounds atonal. Now, this is very interesting. Let's go from a 4 quartal to a 5 quartal chord, a G quartal in this case. G, C, and F. There's one note that they share in common, F. So we're going to hold that F, but we're going to move the other notes. So, again, this is kind of presupposing you're already pretty comfortable with all these triads to be able to move this stuff around. This is not a small task. Boom. Ah, check that out. 1 quartal to 4 quartal to 5 quartal. What an amazing sound. 3, 4. Speaking once to musician Mark Simos, he thought of this as moving sheets of glass, or sheets of ice, I think it was. And it totally has that kind of icy, searching, ambiguous quality. Sounds kind of like some modern jazz stuff. But maybe there's other options that don't have to be associated with guitars without a headstock. So, I think one way to just keep exploring it without necessarily being worried about the results is go through all the inversions. So now start on your 1 quartal first inversion. You can play them all at once. You could cross pick them. It's so cool how that F gets held over. Let's try the next inversion. Oh, I see I did this one up at the 13th. Sure. Oh, I see an error. Or we could cross pick off the top note. What if we did it down an octave? Amazing. Well, I hope that's informative for you. For my loyal patrons, of course, they have access to all 34 slides with all these charts and diagrams, so you can check it out. Yeah, it's an amazing exploration, and in future quick tips, I do want to talk about some applications, or at least some ways that we begin to explore how to apply this stuff. But in the meantime, let's just appreciate the fact that within our major scale, within our 7-note scales, there's this whole world, this whole universe of triads that are built in fourths that gives you a totally new feeling, a totally different relationship to the 7-note scale. So this could be an entryway to start to explore that stuff. So I hope this has been helpful, enjoyable for you, and please let me know what you find in your Quartal explorations by commenting below. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time.